All right, let's dive into this brain research you sent over. It looks like a pretty deep rabbit hole, huh? Looks like mostly stuff from that Fundamentals of Human Neuropsychology book by Bryan Kolb, right? Plus a few other research papers sprinkled in.
Yeah, looks like you've been doing your homework. A lot of really interesting stuff in there, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely fascinating. But I have a feeling we're going to have to unpack it carefully. It's a lot to process.
Yeah, neuroscience can get pretty dense. Where do you want to even start with all this?
Well, I'm kind of intrigued by this whole idea of the brain's evolution. I mean, it's got to be important, right? Like understanding how our brains got to where they are today.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's like trying to understand anything, really. You got to look at its history, where it came from, how it developed. The book actually makes a really interesting point about this.
Okay, what's that?
It says that comparing brain size to intelligence, like just assuming a bigger brain means smarter, that's kind of oversimplifying things.
Yeah, I can see how that might be too simplistic. Like, there's got to be more to it than just sheer size, right?
Exactly. It's more about the organization, the specialization within the brain. They actually use this cool example of songbirds.
Songbirds. Okay, I'm listening.
So researchers have found that the size of certain brain regions in these birds, it actually correlates with how complex their songs are.
Wait, so like a bird with a bigger song control center in its brain can sing more complicated tunes? That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? Could that apply to humans too? Like, could certain skills be linked to the size of specific brain areas?
That's a really fascinating question. Like, could someone with a larger language processing center be a more gifted communicator, for instance?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, think about it. We know that different parts of the brain are specialized for different functions, so why not specific skills too? Though the book also emphasizes how much factors like injuries or the environment can influence brain development.
Ah, the good old nature versus nurture debate, huh?
Exactly. It's always a bit of both.
So how do those factors like injuries or environment, how do they actually affect the brain, like physically?
Well, there's some pretty interesting research on rats that sheds light on that.
Okay, rat research, always a classic.
Right. So they found that early injuries, like really early in a rat's life, can actually reduce its brain size, sometimes by a lot.
Like how much are we talking here?
In some cases, up to 25%.
Wow, 25%. That's a huge difference. So it's not just affecting their abilities, it's actually changing the physical structure of their brains.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic. And when you think about it in human terms, it's like an injury happening to a late stage embryo.
That really makes you think about the potential impact of prenatal injuries, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But there's also a flip side to this. Research has shown that enriching environments can actually increase brain size, specifically in certain areas.
Really? So like positive experiences can actually make parts of the brain grow.
Exactly. They found that rats raised in more stimulating environments, like with lots of visual stuff going on, they developed larger visual cortexes.
Okay, so that's kind of encouraging, right? Our brains aren't necessarily fixed. They can change, they can grow, depending on what we're exposed to.
Yeah, it highlights the brain's plasticity, its ability to adapt. Think about it this way. Every time you learn something new, every time you have a new experience, it could be changing the physical structure of your
I
brain.
like that. It's like we're constantly shaping our own brains.
Exactly. It's a dynamic process, not just the static organs sitting in our heads. But it does make you wonder how all this activity is organized within the brain, right?
Yeah, it must be incredibly complex, like a city or something.
Well, that's actually a pretty good analogy. The book compares the brain to a bustling city with all these different parts working together.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this brain city.
So imagine densely packed groups of cell bodies called nuclei. These are like the city's communities, each specializing in a particular function. And then you have bundles of axons called tracks connecting these communities.
So the tracks are like the roads or highways carrying information between different parts of the brain.
Exactly. It's a complex transportation system within the brain.
And what about the nerves? Where do they fit into this city analogy?
Think of nerves as the highways leading in and out of the city, carrying messages to and from the rest of the body.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture here. We've got these communities, these roadways, these highways, all working together to keep everything running smoothly. But what about the individual units within those communities? What's happening at the cellular level?
Ah, that's where we delve into the world of the neuron. And to understand the neuron, we need to shift our analogy a bit.
Okay, I'm ready for a new image. What have you got?
Imagine a river system with all its twists and turns and branches. That's a great way to visualize a neuron.
A river system, huh? Okay, I'm with you.
So the dendrites of a neuron, they're like the tributaries, branching out and gathering information from other neurons. Then you have the cell body, like the main channel of the river, where all that information gets integrated and processed.
Okay, I see it. The dendrites are collecting information, and the cell body is making sense of it all. What happens next?
Well, then you have the axon, which is like a powerful river carrying the processed information away from the cell body. It flows until it reaches its destination, the teleodendria.
So the axon is like the expressway of the neuron.
Exactly. And at the end of the axon, you have the end feet, where the message gets released onto other neurons.
So it's like the river emptying out into a larger body of water.
Exactly. It's a beautifully orchestrated process of communication.
This river analogy is really helping me visualize it. But if we want to understand what's happening inside the neuron itself, we probably need another analogy, right?
You got it. The river system is great for understanding the flow of information, but to really grasp the inner workings of a neuron, let's switch to something a bit more structured.
All right, lay it on me. What's the new analogy?
Think of the neuron as a bustling factory.
A factory. Okay, this should be good.
So picture the nucleus as the executive office, where all the blueprints are stored. The blueprints are the genes and chromosomes that control the cell's activities.
I like it. So the nucleus is calling the shots.
Right. Then you have the endoplasmic reticulum, which is like the factory floor. That's where proteins are assembled according to the blueprints.
So that's where the real work gets done, the protein production. What about the Golgi bodies? What role do they play?
The Golgi bodies are like the packaging and shipping department. They take those newly made proteins, package them up, and send them out to where they need to go.
It's incredible. It's like this whole little world happening inside a single neuron. And to think we have billions of these little factories in our brains.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? Each component playing a vital role, working together to create the amazing capabilities of the human brain.
It really makes you appreciate just how much is going on beneath the surface. But speaking of everyday life, how does all this neural activity translate into our actual experiences? Like how do we see a sunset, hear a song, or feel a hug?
That's a great question. And it brings us to the fascinating world of our senses. Our brains have these remarkable systems for gathering information from the world around us and transforming it into meaningful experiences.
It's funny how we take our senses for granted. We just see, hear, touch, smell, taste, but we rarely stop to think about all the incredible complexity happening behind the scenes.
It's true. And to give you a sense of just how complex these systems are, the book uses this really interesting example. It asks, why is it that when you move your hand back and forth in front of your eyes, it gets blurry? But if you move your head, the world stays clear.
It is weird when you think about it. I've never really stopped to consider that before. What's the explanation?
Well, it turns out our brains have this amazing ability to differentiate between movements we make ourselves and movements that are happening in the external world. So when you move your head, there are receptors in your body that tell your visual system, hey, I'm the one moving here, so adjust accordingly.
So, like, my brain is constantly making adjustments to keep my visual world stable, even when I'm moving around.
Exactly. It's happening all the time without us even realizing it. And this is just one example of how intricate and sophisticated our sensory systems are.
Wow, this is already blowing my mind, and we've only just dipped our toes in. I think we need to dive deeper into these sensory systems and explore how they work.
Absolutely. There's a whole world of sensory processing waiting to be discovered.
Well, lead the way. I'm ready to keep exploring.
All right, so where were we? Ah, yes, those sensory highways leading to the brain.
Right, those pathways that carry information from our senses. So let's say I'm looking at a gorgeous sunset. How does that visual information actually travel from my eyes to my brain?
Okay, so when you look at a sunset, the light enters your eyes first, right? And it stimulates special cells in your retina called photoreceptor cells.
Photoreceptor cells, okay.
Yeah.
What do they do?
They basically convert that light into electrical signals, which then get transmitted through the optic nerve.
Ah, so the optic nerve is kind of like the main cable carrying all that visual data. Where does it go from there?
Good question. It goes to a relay station in the thalamus, deep inside the brain.
A relay station. What happens there?
Well, think of the thalamus like a switchboard operator, sorting all the incoming calls and directing them to the right department. So in this case, it takes those visual signals and sends them to the visual cortex at the back of the brain.
Ah, the visual cortex. That's where the real magic happens, right?
Yeah.
Turning those electrical signals into, well, the experience of seeing a sunset.
Exactly. It's where all that information gets decoded and interpreted. But here's the thing. It's not just one big processing center. The visual cortex is actually divided into all these specialized areas, each handling a different aspect of visual information.
So it's like different teams within a company, each with its own area of expertise.
Perfect analogy. Some areas are dedicated to color, others to motion, others to form and depth, all working together to create a complete visual experience.
So even something as simple as seeing a sunset involves this incredibly complex, multi-layered process in the brain.
Yeah.
Wild. But what about attention? I mean, we can't possibly process every little detail of everything we see, right?
You're absolutely right. Attention is crucial. It's like a spotlight, highlighting certain parts of our sensory experience and filtering out others. It helps us focus on what's important and not get overwhelmed by all the incoming information.
So how does our brain decide where to point that spotlight? What determines what we pay attention to?
It's a combination of things. There's bottom-up attention, which is driven by how noticeable things are in the environment, like a sudden loud noise or a bright flash of light. Those things automatically grab our attention.
Makes sense. Our brains are wired to pay attention to things that could be dangerous or important.
Right. But we also have top-down attention, which is more deliberate.
Yeah.
Like when you're searching for your keys in a messy room, you're consciously choosing what to focus on.
So it's about intentionally directing our attention towards something specific based on our goals.
Exactly. And this interplay between bottom-up and top-down attention is constantly shaping our perception of the world.
This makes me think about how subjective our experiences can be. What I pay attention to might be totally different from what someone else notices, even if we're both looking at the same thing.
Absolutely. Our unique experiences, our memories, our emotions, all these things can influence where our attention goes and how we interpret the world.
So it's not just about what our senses pick up. It's also about how our brains actively filter and interpret that information.
Exactly. And you know that example we talked about earlier with the hand moving in front of the face? That's a great illustration of this.
Oh yeah, right. The blurry hand versus the clear world when you move your head. Let's revisit that.
Okay, so when you move your hand, your visual system is getting information about two things at once: the movement of your hand and the changing background behind it.
Right.
And those two pieces of information conflict, which causes the blur.
Okay, but why doesn't that happen when I move my head?
Because when you move your head, your brain uses information from your inner ear and other senses to anticipate that movement. And it actually adjusts the incoming visual information to keep everything stable.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's like my brain is saying, I know you're moving your head, so I'm going to compensate for that and keep the world looking normal.
Exactly. It highlights how our brains are constantly working behind the scenes to create a seamless, coherent experience.
So even though the basic sensory information might be the same, whether we're moving our hand or our head, our brain is actively interpreting and filtering it in different ways.
Precisely. And that brings us to another interesting concept: sensory submodalities.
Submodalities, that sounds a bit technical.
It's not that complicated. Think of it this way. Each of our senses can be broken down into different aspects or submodalities.
Okay.
So for vision, you've got submodalities for color, motion, depth, form, like different tools in a toolbox.
Ah, got it. So each sense has its own set of specialized tools for processing different types of information.
Exactly. And each submodality has its own dedicated pathway in the brain.
So if I'm looking at a red apple rolling across a table, different parts of my visual cortex are processing the color, the motion, the shape, and the distance of that apple all at the same time.
That's exactly right. And what's fascinating is that we're not always consciously aware of all these submodalities at work. Some of them happen below the level of awareness, but they're still essential for our experience.
So there's a whole world of sensory processing going on that we just never even think about. That's kind of mind-blowing.
It is. Think about all the visual submodalities that allow you to maintain your balance, coordinate your movements, and perceive depth. You don't consciously think about these things, but they're happening all the time.
It's amazing how much our brains are doing behind the scenes.
Huh.
But if we have all these separate processing pathways for different aspects of our senses, how does it all come together? How do we get a unified experience of the world?
That's the million-dollar question. And it takes us to the higher cortical areas, where information from different senses actually converges.
So it's like different departments in a company coming together to collaborate on a big project.
Exactly. And this is where multisensory integration comes in. It's how we combine information from sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste to create a cohesive experience of the world.
So it's not just about seeing a delicious meal, it's about smelling it, tasting it, feeling a texture, hearing the crunch as you bite into it. Is all those senses working together?
You got it. Multisensory integration allows us to experience the world in all its richness and complexity. It's pretty incredible.
Okay, so we've talked about those sensory pathways,
Yeah.
attention, submodalities, and how it all comes together. But what about the specific areas of the brain that are responsible for all of this?
Ah, yes. That's our next stop on this brain exploration tour. Time to delve into those specialized regions and see what they're all about.
Sounds good to me. Let's keep going. Welcome back to our deep dive. It's amazing how we've gone from this big picture view of the brain to the microscopic level, from evolution to these tiny neurons.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? But there's still so much more to uncover. Now we're getting to the really big questions, the mysteries that have puzzled people for centuries.
Okay, bring on the mysteries. What's first on the agenda?
Well, how about the biggest mystery of them all? Consciousness. What is it about the brain that creates that subjective experience, that awareness, the feeling of what it's like to be?
Consciousness, huh? It's like the holy grail of neuroscience, right? It almost feels impossible to even define, let alone explain. What have you learned from all this research that helps make sense of it?
One thing's for sure. Consciousness isn't like an on-off switch. It's more like a spectrum, a gradual range of awareness that probably evolved alongside our other abilities, like our senses and motor skills.
So as our brains got more complex, our ability to experience the world expanded, and so did our consciousness.
That's the idea. And remember how we talked about language? That plays a big role in shaping our conscious experience too. It lets us reflect on our thoughts, share our ideas, and tell stories about ourselves.
But what about people who have trouble with language, like those with aphasia? Are they still conscious, even if they can't communicate in the same way?
That's a really important question, and it challenges the idea that language is the only thing that matters for consciousness. Because people with aphasia, they're still aware, they still have thoughts and feelings, even if they can't always express them.
So if language isn't the whole story, what else could be going on? Is it about the way our brains are wired, all those intricate connections between neurons?
Some scientists think that consciousness emerges from those very interactions, the way different parts of the brain communicate and work together. It's not about one specific area, but rather the whole network in action.
So it's like consciousness is a symphony created by the whole orchestra of the brain, all the different sections playing together.
Exactly. It's a beautiful and complex collaboration. And this leads to another huge question, the nature of the self. If our sense of self isn't just a product of language, then what is it? Is it the unique pattern of connections in our brains, the sum of all our experiences? It's still a big unknown.
Those are some huge questions. And it seems like the more we learn about the brain, the more we realize how much we still don't know.
True. But that's part of what makes it so exciting. Neuroscience is full of mysteries waiting to be solved. The journey itself is incredible, even if we never have all the answers.
Okay, so consciousness and the self are still open questions. But what about language itself? We've talked about its role in consciousness, but it's such a defining feature of what makes us human. What else can you tell me about the brain's language abilities?
Language is pretty amazing, right? It lets us share complex ideas, build relationships, create art, and pass knowledge down through generations. And it all comes from this incredibly intricate system in the brain.
So where exactly in the brain does all this language processing happen?
There are a few key areas that are especially important for language. Remember how we've talked about the left hemisphere of the brain? Well, that's where we find two crucial language centers, Broca's area and Wernicke's area.
Right, I've heard of those before, but remind me, what do they actually do?
Broca's area is all about speech production, helping us form words and sentences. Wernicke's area, on the other hand, is essential for understanding language, making sense of the words we hear or read.
So if I'm having a conversation, Broca's area is helping me speak, and Wernicke's area is helping me understand what the other person is saying.
Exactly. Though it's important to remember that it's not just those two areas working in isolation. Language processing involves a whole network of regions in the brain, all collaborating together.
It seems like everything in the brain is interconnected in some way.
It really is. The brain is a master of integration.
Where this has been an incredible journey, from the evolution of the brain to the mysteries of consciousness and everything in between. We've covered so much ground.
It's been a pleasure exploring these fascinating topics with you. I hope it sparked your curiosity about the brain and all its wonders.
It definitely has. I feel like I'm seeing the world, even my own thoughts and experiences, in a whole new light.
That's the power of understanding the brain. It gives you a new perspective on everything.
I can't thank you enough for guiding me through all of this. It's been amazing.
The pleasure was all mine. Just remember, there's still so much to learn about the brain. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop being amazed by this incredible organ.
That's great advice. To all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the human brain. Until next time.